Greetings comic lovers and welcome back to Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from reviews of comics new and old to history to anecdotes to really wherever our whims take us. The Joker. He is utilized much too often, but I am part of the problem, snatching up Joker titles left and right. This one is a little bit different in that the Joker is utilized here as a framing device to give you different stories about some of Batman's other villains, his rogues gallery. There are some who say that Batman has the best rogues out there, and while there are some who might rise to debate that, it is clear that Batman does have strong villains. Villains who can hold their own stories, meaning that they don't need the Dark Knight to be there all the time to make them interesting. He can either not be prominent or not there at all, and that does indeed indicate some strong characterization. Now, some of these villains, or the more prominent, or let's be real, most of them, end up in Arkham Asylum, which is itself a staple part of Batman lore, although it's actually a bit newer, relatively speaking, when it comes to Batman, just based on how long Batman has been around. So it makes sense to frame a series around it. This series itself, Joker's Asylum, came out in 2008. It had 5 issues, and so did the second series, which began in 2010. However, because of how it came out, sometimes it's written like from 2008 to 2010. However, it all came out in 2008. And now you can get them all together. Digitally is easier, but you can also try and track them down physically if you're like me and you like that sort of thing. Now, the right above these tells you that they're from the Joker's perspective, but that varies. It happens in some of the tales, but not all of them. It's a case-by-case thing. This is not some deep examination of Gotham's elite through the eyes of the Joker. It's rather just a series of different stories about different villains. They vary in tone and execution, but they're all dark. We will go in the order that they were released, which was not the order I read them in, but more on that later. Let's do it. Let's take over the Asylum. But before we get started, I'm Sasha, and if you're enjoying this content, you know what to do. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Join us on this comic book journey. Also, at the time of this recording, we have merch. We have, at the time of this recording, Casually Comics code POOT. So if you're interested, check that out. We have links down below. Now, the first story in Joker's Asylum is appropriately enough a Joker story. And this one is called, wait for it, Joker's Wild. Yes, this is a title that they like to trot out again and again. This story was written by Arvid Nelson with art by Alex Sanchez. It's presented by the Joker as one of his past exploits, wherein he hijacked a television broadcast. Again, he was masquerading as the host and he takes over the show, only now the categories are much more complicated and the contestants have to compete under peril of death, so no pressure. What follows is a commentary on entertainment culture. Again, and spoilers, it is not a positive look. I mean, is it ever? The broadcast director won't cut to standby because don't people know how much the ratings are going up? If it bleeds, it leads. And he's also sexist, because why not? Just give him all the negative traits. Get a second helping.
Are you a complete airhead, Carol? Do you have any idea what this is gonna do for our ratings? Those people in the studio signed releases. We're not liable.
Fun lawyer fact, you can't actually sign away your right to sue. The waiver just adds an extra layer of red tape. The Joker keeps pulling these fake outs, not actually killing the contestants, like for example spraying one with ginger ale instead of acid. And the audience watching is getting more and more into it, be they at home, at the bar, or some kids who are watching because the parents aren't paying attention. Commentary on parenting. Ooh, bad. So you know where this is going. The Joker is a homicidal maniac, but is it us who are the true monsters? I had to check and make sure that my nose was still on straight because they hit the point pretty hard. The Joker had placed a hidden camera inside the broadcast center, and so he plays that for all the people and then lectures them. So who's the real sicko America? Me, for playing out this little prank? The producers and executives at the networks who let it all happen? Or is it the people who mindlessly watched it all on your television sets? Do you get it? Feel bad. Batman stops it at this point. The end. And so we see the Joker doing something we've seen him do before, with a message that we've heard before in a way that we've seen it told before. The art was interesting though. It was very chaotic and kind of grungy. Dirty feeling. It evoked how this story wanted you to feel. We'll do an overview of all of them at the end, but now onto the Penguin. This one is called He Who Laughs Last and is by Jason Aaron with art by Dave McCaig. And this one is dark. It made my skin crawl. Every time I read it, it made my skin crawl. The vibes on the cover very much match the interior. With this series, the interior artist also does the cover, so by looking at that, you can get a sense of what you're gonna get. And that's nice. This story sees the Joker narrating from his cell, as if you're walking down the hallway, a passerby, and you come up close, and all you can see are his eyes through the slat. And he says that he has a tale to tell about Oswald Cobblepot. This one opens in the past with Oswald being cruelly mocked for bringing some flowers to a girl who he'd received a love note from, only the note was a fake. It was written by her friend as a prank. It then flashes forward to Oswald in a car. We see that he surrounds himself with vapid women attached to his wealth and power. That his relationship with women and just people in general, but especially women, has become very warped. He's not even interacting with them. They're just there, and ultimately they annoy him and he kicks them out, and they call him names, which then reinforces some of the things that he has going on. He goes to one of Gotham's shady black markets and there sees a woman for sale. Her name is Violet. Human trafficking. Something about her compels him and he purchases her. But he frames it like he didn't, like he couldn't stand seeing her in a cage, and so he saved her, and that's how she feels. She feels like she's been rescued. And so the two embark on a kind of relationship where she seems to like him, but of course there are so many dynamics and psychological things at play. There's a lot of depth. You can analyze this one for some time. Penguin even tells Batman about her while Batman is there beating up some goons while he's checking in to see if the Penguin is keeping his nose clean, which he's not.
I'm her hero. She says above all else, I just don't want to let her down.
It sounds nice-ish, but there's also a dark, possessive undercurrent, and just the art underscores the fact that this isn't okay and it's not romantic, and it all crashes down when they're on a date and he's about to confess his love, but then he looks over and he thinks that he hears and sees the chef laughing at him. It completely triggers him, sets him off. He wants to kill the man right there. He reaches for a knife and Violet sees his face and he sees that she can see that there's something off about him, and so he pulls it back, but that doesn't stop him from completely destroying this man's life. First he has the restaurant shut down so that the man gets fired. Then he has the man's girlfriend deported. Then he has the man's best friend framed for child porn. Then he has some tenants move into the building who play music, make noise constantly, and make sure that the landlord doesn't accept his calls anymore. Then he has his church shut down by releasing some killer bees inside of it. And then he causes the man's sobriety to collapse by having a 24-hour liquor store open across the street. And he just reads the newspaper every day, waiting, until finally the man kills himself. And when he reads this obit, the look on his face alerts Violet to the fact that he's a monster. She snoops and finds a scrapbook he's kept of all the people whose lives he's destroyed, and she tries to leave him. She calls him a monster. And there's this interesting parallel drawn, or rather cemented, between her and his birds, and it's played out horrifically when he returns her to the human traffickers and puts her back in the cage and leaves her there. As he talks to Violet as if this is an ordinary breakup, and he's back with the woman from the limo. Horrifying, awful, layered, intriguing. There's so much going on here. The complexities of views of women, the true vileness of Oswald that bleeds through and surpasses the hardships he suffered. It's scary and villainous and paints the Penguin as someone truly vile. This doesn't feel like the Joker's view of the Penguin, but rather just a story about the Penguin. Either way, it goes to some dark places, but within the safe confines of fiction. Although some will disagree with that statement and miles will vary. It's a lot of a lot. It is a story about a dark villain that wants them to look deplorable. And it succeeds. Mission accomplished. Next up, Poison Ivy, who is not treading in any particularly new territory or any kind of visceral psychological things. It's very much Ivy in eco-terrorist form. This story is called Deflowered and the author is J.T. Krull, and the art is by Guillaume March. This story has a very chatty Joker framing it. It seems like he's the host of like a lifestyle show, maybe a garden show. He even has a giant Venus flytrap that he's feeding hands. He also says this is a very revealing story, and the revealing is bolded, which I think is an inside play, or rather inside joke, about the fact that this story has a lot of cake. This story claps. It's thick with 2 C's. So thick that the first C is leaning on the second C. There is a lot. It veers into the point where it's actually a bit distracting. So your mileage may vary, but if that's your kind of thing, I found it. Here it is for you. You're welcome. This one opens with a Mr. Cabaret being murdered by a plant. A murder he was way too calm about at first.
Allison, get me some scissors. No, make thine axe.
Well, he does live in Gotham. I guess you just get less phased over time, or you just gotta be psychologically prepared. This story is the most Batman heavy of the bunch. There are several Batman cutaways to him trying to solve the case, and he has the most lines here of any story. So Poison Ivy doesn't feel like she gets to stand out as much comparatively to the others. Despite that, interestingly enough, she narrates some portions of this. So the whole it's from the Joker's perspective kind of falls apart for her story, at least. And so you get to see her origins, which is a chunk of this, and then also see her transformation to where she can actually physically feel the plight of plants, and also see her beginning of a disconnect with humanity. How she feels like a vengeful Eve, which is meant to be an explanation for why she's naked for a lot of this. Strategic leave, strategic hair. As for what she's doing, well, it's nothing revolutionary, at least not plot-wise. She's killing a bunch of people who were involved in the development from early on in her transformation, and she's killing them brutally for her own personal satisfaction. They even managed to work in an Ivy pretending to be a prostitute scene. Look, Poison Ivy is sexy, yes, but there are other things to her character. They do highlight her intelligence, which is nice because she does have a decoy set up for Batman, who didn't even know that she was really onto him, and so she's able to kill the person she wants, hacking him into pieces with a tiny axe. And I do like her last line from there. Now if only we could build a house with the pieces, then we'd really be onto something, wouldn't we? Next story, the Scarecrow. It's the Scarecrow's time at the time of this recording. He even has an event. Get it, Dr. Crane. Enjoy the spotlight before the Joker takes it back says the person reviewing a series that is using the Joker as the hook. The Scarecrow story is called Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, with our typical Dark Knight pun in play. This one is by Joe Harris with art by Juan Doe. It takes on a more Are You Afraid of the Dark, Tales from the Crypt style for the narration, like you're sitting around a campfire hearing a scary story about the Scarecrow. This one is playing in some tried and true tropes. The teenage slumber party held by a popular girl who no one actually likes but everyone is afraid of, and she wants to prank an unpopular girl because she's power tripping. Lindsay is the intended victim, and the prank is going to be some kind of revenge porn thing where they want to film her during 7 Minutes in Heaven with a boy that they're going to have, but it's all going to be set up so all the names and the pick a name thing are going to be hers. It's no, too much. I have no idea if this accurately represents teenage life, having lived my teenage years as a loner. I hope it does not. I hope it is exaggerated. We see as Lindsay arrives that there is a Scarecrow looming first in the background and then the foreground, and there's some interesting narration about fear happening while all this is going on. Each of us knows to some degree, most deep and burrowing, what it truly means to be afraid. But fear, true fear, is a tool. Something plied by the strong and stuffed down the throats of the weak. Taken in by the oppressed, however, and loved, it becomes their ally. Loved and nurtured, it can be a blade. Do not fear your fear. Embrace it. So we see that Lindsay is in therapy, and as you can glean from that, her therapist is Dr. Jonathan Crane. He's gotten very invested in Lindsay's life, and he tells her to go to this party to face her fears, even though she knows that there's something that's gonna happen there. What she doesn't know is that her doctor is gonna go too, as the Scarecrow. And so we see the teens at this party picked off one by one as he targets their fears. The art is very blocky and cute, but it can still evoke a very eerie feeling. There's some dark imagery in this that is quite jarring when presented this way. Some of these teens end badly. Lindsay knew that there was some kind of prank gonna happen, and she does see the camera, but she doesn't see the Scarecrow lurking under the bed. We see that the Scarecrow feels a connection with Lindsay, like he's trying to teach her how to wield fear and why it's important. And we're given a hint that she may have known who he was before the slumber party. Batman intervenes at this point, but the damage is done. Lindsay has gotten a taste of fear and wielding it and enjoys the power that it gives her. And so she wants to continue on doing Crane's experiments on her own. This one is a little cliched, but the art style helps it along, as does the mystery of wanting to know what each teen's fear is and see where it's going with Lindsay. You do buy the idea that the Scarecrow would have groupies or disciples, and you get an interesting vibe here where it's about the Scarecrow but also about the impact the Scarecrow can have on other people through his obsession with fear. It's almost like he's more of an idea. It's very interesting. Not revolutionary, but a decent Scarecrow story. Dare I say fun in a macabre sort of way. Last one, Two-Face. This one makes the most out of having the Joker as a narrator slash having that kind of framing device, in that it makes it ever so slightly interactive. This is Two-Face 2. Yes, that's a pun. This one is by David Hine with art by Andy Clark. This one has the strongest the Joker is just talking to you vibe, like it's very conversational, like the two of you are sitting in a cell gossiping about Two-Face, and that continues on throughout all of it. He tells of a new peer counseling program that was implemented at Arkham so that people could hopefully find inspiration and healing through talking with someone they could relate to. So Harvey Dent is paired with a man called Holman Hunt, who has a very similar disfigurement to his own, only he received his while he was volunteering as a firefighter and then he was saved by Batman. He means for his story to be inspirational and uplifting, positive, only Two-Face doesn't take it that way. Instead, what he gets out of it is that they had very similar disfigurements happen to them, only Holman ended up good and he ended up bad, and he's fascinated by this. What's your explanation? Moral weakness? Some kind of genetic predisposition towards evil? Was I born bad? Holman doesn't believe this, and he instead credits his recovery to his friends, his faith, and his wife, which triggers Two-Face. My wife left me. I recovered. You can too. I can help you. You can help me be just like you. Happy, fulfilled, smug, self-righteous. He counters that if Hunt believes that he can make Two-Face like him, then couldn't Two-Face also do the reverse? He flips his coin and says that he won't be doing any more peer counseling, but that he'll see him again, and everybody should be concerned by this, but no, they're not. And so Two-Face breaks out of Arkham, kidnaps Holman and his wife, and takes them and puts them into a scenario. There's supposed to be two choices. There's Batman tied up on one end. There's his wife suspended under acid on the other, and a little drop hits her face. The choice: either let the acid fall on his wife and save Batman, or shoot Batman and save his wife. This paralyzes Holman. He tries to find a third option, and so he turns the gun on Two-Face, only it wasn't loaded because it wasn't about that. It was about trying to get him into Two-Face's headspace. Although if you think about it, I'm not sure if the logic carries all the way through, though that may be intentional because Two-Face is jealous, but you can get multiple reads on this one. Either way, it wasn't really Batman, and this was all supposed to be about the point that there is no actual choice. It's all an illusion. There is only chance. Choice is just something that people tell themselves, a fairy tale to make themselves feel better about the horror that truly they have no control. Batman lets this all finish because, you know, you can't interrupt a good monologue, that's rude, but the damage is already done. And Holman sees that his wife is disappointed and angered by the fact that she wasn't his first choice automatically, and so he leaves. And the story ends by asking you to flip a coin so that you can determine, or rather chance can determine the outcome. Does Holman get a happy ending or a tragic one? The end. Bye, Mr. J. Overall, this series is pretty decent. It presents all the different Batman villains as serious threats in different ways, and they all feel distinct. You don't feel like you're reading the same story with a different coat of paint. Some come off better than others, though of course which you think that is will vary based on the type of story that you enjoy. For me personally, I felt the Joker was the weakest because it played in the most well played out territory. It was also not as clever as it seemed to think it was. The relationship between people and entertainment is more complicated than many like to make it. Instead, this is very reductive, and it comes across very much like video games are bad. Don't read Catcher in the Rye. Don't let the kids read comic books because it's going to turn them into juvenile delinquents. We need some kind of code. But it's a competent story and the art is unique. It's a good thing for me, at least, that I read them not chronologically, because if I'd started with this Joker one, I'm not sure if I would have continued because I found it so derivative. Although you don't need to read them in a specific order because they are random stories. Poison Ivy also isn't the finest villain showcase here. She feels more secondary to the story despite getting to narrate a portion. However, it is nice to see her doing her own thing. At the time of this recording, sometimes some authors can just make her Harley Quinn's girlfriend. So it is nice to be shown that she is a very credible villain threat in her own right, and she has her own motivations and her own intriguing stuff going on. She can stand on her own. She did before, she can do it again. The relationship can be there as long as it doesn't overwhelm her character and make her less. We want everything to make characters more interesting, not make them a one-note stereotype. That's my 2 cents. However, that's not to say that she's the best represented here, because her story is pretty basic. Poison Ivy murders people because plants, and there does seem to be more of a focus on just, ooh, look at how nice she looks, cake, cake, cake. But this one also does have a bit of a Batman episode vibe, so that could be enjoyable for some. The remaining 3, Scarecrow, Penguin, and Two-Face, are all good in their own ways, and they're each quite horrifying. The Penguin story is disturbing, and the art marries so well with it and leaves one feeling unsettled. It showcases a very dark underbelly of Gotham, and it presents the Penguin as a power player in a very different and insidious way to the others. It showcases an ugliness that comes from within, not from without, and it also manages to present his backstory, keep the sadness, but also not present it in such a way that makes it feel like an excuse or make him seem sympathetic. So well played. It is pretty dark though, maybe too dark for some. Subject matter, rating. The Scarecrows is a nice twist on the familiar, although I can see some finding it too tropey. Where it really sold me was on the idea of getting into the Scarecrow's headspace, seeing how he fetishizes fear, but also making some interesting commentary on how fear can be utilized. And it actually plays out very well because you do see people utilize fear in very different ways. In the real world and also in this story, you see different examples such as Heather. Yes, that was the name of the main girl. I remember Heather's too. Lindsay, and the Scarecrow himself. The juxtaposition of the art style to the story for me worked very well, but of course, as with anything art, mileage varies. The Two-Face one is interesting, though I'm not sure the logic holds, but it gets major points by working Two-Face's own motif into the story. It's a sad, sad story. Many of these stories are not uppers, but they can be page turners. It was also nice to see Batman take a back seat for most of them. Poison Ivy. I'm a fan of the concept, even though the Joker as a framing device was a little weak, but anything that gets me more Batman rogues. Although, when you think about it, the Joker is one of Arkham's most prolific inmates, so he makes sense in an in-universe way as narrator as well. This may be a bit too random for some, but it may also be a nice break for people who are a bit tired of the ongoing slog of canon or just keeping up with everything. Just to read a story that feels like it could take place at any time. But I want to hear from you. What do you think of this concept? Did you read it? Did you like them? Which was your favorite? Do you completely disagree with me? Which villain do you wish had more time in the spotlight? Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. And I can't not wave. Bye-bye.